So, with the first episode of the Thousand Year Blood War arc Core 4 behind us, we've now seen Yoruichi's battle against Askin in full, where she revealed the greatest extent of her power so far. Shunko Raijin Senkei Shunryoku Kubyo Senki, a brand new form that totally changes Yoruichi into a being that combines her innate physicality with her immeasurable Shunko prowess. Now, she kind of always fights like that, true, but this is by far the greatest level we've ever seen it displayed at. And although she holds her own extremely well, even seemingly defeating the sternritter at one point, Askin ultimately returns, while Yoruichi ends up succumbing to her poisoning. When all is said and done then, it's hard not to wonder if Shunko alone was really enough, if it was the right call here. Why does Yoruichi choose not to use her Zanpakutō in battle? Would she realistically have fared any better against such a powerful and broken opponent if she'd brought her blade along, or would the outcome have ended up the same anyway? Surely, though, as a Shinigami, she is knowingly locking away so much of her true strength and potential on the battlefield by choosing to neglect it. Well, in today's video, we've got an answer to that very question. We're going to take a look at Yoruichi and why she doesn't use her Zanpakutō in battle, even when it seems like she's putting herself at an enormous disadvantage by choosing not to do so. We're really going to look at the answer that's been given, analyze it, and kind of see how we feel about it ultimately at the end of the day. Once you've watched the video, let me know your thoughts on this topic down in the comments below. How do you feel about the answer that's given as to why Yoruichi doesn't use her Zanpakutō? Do you think it makes sense? And what do you think Yoruichi's Zanpakutō actually does to elicit such a response? Before we continue, if you haven't done yet, make sure to check out my spoiler review of episode 41, God of Thunder, uploaded just a couple of days ago for a more in-depth look at the episode, including a shot-by-shot analysis of how it compares to the manga, what they cut out, what they added, all of that good stuff. And if you want to support the channel that extra step further, Patreon is one of the best ways to do that. You get your name in the credits of every single video as a supporter who is taking that extra step. So a huge thank you to everyone who is doing so, it really does mean a lot. Let's just cut to the chase. Why doesn't Yoruichi use a Zanpakutō in battle? Despite being a previous captain of the Gotei 13, Yoruichi has never once so much as produced a Zanpakutō of her own in the manga, let alone used one, save for a single panel where a blade can be seen at her waist when she was younger and training with Kisuke. No reason was ever given for why Yoruichi seemed to forego her Zanpakutō in the manga. It was just commonly accepted and no character ever brought it up, though the community had their suspicions for years. As a member of the House of Shihoin, one of the 5 great noble houses, it was totally reasonable to assume that perhaps her family instead wielded an inherited Zanpakutō, a ceremonial blade, as we've seen on very rare occasion before, though admittedly, most of the time, these ancestral noble Zanpakutō were not found in the manga. Both the Suna Yashiro's Enrikyoten and the Kuchiki's Muramasa, no, not the guy from the filler, were revealed in Can't Fear Your Own World. Meanwhile, the Shinken Hakyoken was only revealed right at the very end of the manga, though before Yoruichi's newest form. The more popular belief, of course, was that Yoruichi, as a Hakuda and Shunpo master of virtually unmatched skill, just preferred not to use Zanjutsu despite the benefits it might offer. And ultimately, this essentially turned out to be the case, as was revealed, unsurprisingly, in Can't Fear Your Own World. In Chapter 12 of the light novel series, Yoruichi and Soifon confront the novel's villain, Tokinada Suna Yashiro, and their exchange plays out like this. Tokinada was silent for a while, then eventually put on a sarcastic smile and let escape a loud sigh. So, Yoruichi Shihoin, who holds no Zanpakutō, and the 9th generation of the Fon family, who specializes in martial arts. I see. It seems that you've heard of my Zanpakutō's ability from Kyoraku, that chatterbox. How rude. I've got my own Zanpakutō. It's just that I'm much stronger at fighting in combat. That's why soothing my sulking sword is part of my daily routine. Ms. Yoruichi comforts her Zanpakutō every day? Imagining that, Soifon felt terrific jealousy for Yoruichi's Zanpakutō, even as she remained vigilant around Tokinada and would not say such a thing out loud. And there you have it from Yoruichi herself. She's stronger in combat without her Zanpakutō, and has to comfort it every single day as a result. Now, the real question is, how do we feel about this answer? Because to be totally honest, although it is kind of the Occam's razor result, I'm not really sure it makes that much sense. What could her Zanpakutō's ability possibly be that she is straight up worse off for bringing it with her, for at least bringing the Zanpakutō along? Think about it. Yoruichi specializes in Hakuda and Shunpo, and mixing in some Kido in order to use Shunko, and we've seen that her Shunko skill is so great as to be somehow mixed into her very DNA. Kubo revealed on Club Outside that Yoruichi's cat transformation stems from her bloodline. It is innate to the Shihoin family, and both Raijin Senkei and Kokubyo Senki mix Shunko with her feline nature. I speculated in my episode 41 review that Kisuke cooked up Yoruichi's transformation himself, which seems very likely to me, but Raijin Senkei is clearly her own ability, and even that produces a vague comparison with her cat self, transforming the tufts of her hair into a kind of pair of electric cat ears. All this is to say, why does it seem as though her Shunko is inherently more a part of her than her own Zanpakutō? How can her Zanpakutō be so completely at odds, not just with Yoruichi's personality, but with presumably who she actually is? Some might look to the likes of Soifon's Bankai, Jakuho Raiko-ben, as an example of something similar, but it always felt to me like Jakuho Raiko-ben absolutely reflected a side of Soifon, just a side that she didn't necessarily want to present to the world. For Yoruichi to have trained with an Asauchi, imprinted her very soul upon that blade, and to have then effectively cast it aside, seen what it can do, and be like, oh, this kind of sucks, actually. I much prefer just using my hands and feet. That's extremely weird. She clearly, though, cares a great deal for her Zanpakutō, as she comforts it daily. But considering the key message, rooted at the heart of the blade is me, I can't help but think this relationship totally flies in the face of that. It's like Ichigo finding out that Zangetsu's primary power is Getsuga Tensho, and then just abandoning White every time he fights, instead being like, actually, me, because that's who I'm talking to, can you just kind of sit this one out yet again? Because I'd much rather punch them than use your ability, thanks. And then imagining White just being totally despondent over the fact that they have essentially been thrown aside. For the umpteenth time, I mean, this has probably been going on for centuries. Yoruichi absolutely is immensely skilled at Hakuda and Shunpo, and Kido too, to be able to utilize Shunko in the way she does. So much so that, yes, she's capable of taking on some of the series' strongest characters without using her Zanpakutō, but is there really a downside to just bringing her Zanpakutō along and maybe using it? Unless its ability is somehow detrimental to her, it feels like it would only ever be an asset, and to not want to use it is kind of breaking a fundamental law of the Shinigami. Aizen was punished by Kubo for trying to cast aside Kyoka Suigetsu. It was explicitly made out to be the wrong thing to do. And it was only after spending 2 years bonded with his blade in prison that he was able to regain its trust. And yet when Yoruichi does it, and has been doing it for centuries, it's apparently okay, because she consoles it every single day. But she's effectively consoling herself, which should tell you that there's a part of her that hates what's happening here, that hates the choice that's being made, that is absolutely depressed about the fact that Yoruichi doesn't use her Zanpakutō. If anything, that kind of, again, it flies in the face of the idea of the blade is me. These are not equal partners. This isn't even herself. This feels like a master and servant dynamic, one that kind of has to abide by the rules and the laws that Yoruichi herself is making. I can't help but feel like having a relationship with your Zanpakutō like this for so long, to the point where, by the way, if she still has to console it every single day, as recently as, well, after the 1,000-Year Blood War arc, this must be extraordinarily damaging to her. It is not getting better. If she has to console it every single day, the Zanpakutō has never accepted this reality. I would love to find out what Yoruichi's Zanpakutō can actually do, in an effort just to try and make some sense of this, because it is really weird to me. In what universe would it hurt to use your Zanpakutō if, for example, it turns out Raijin Senkei isn't enough? At the very least, you've given it a try. Kisuke could just throw her Zanpakutō when she's out of other options. Again, at the very least, it would give her another avenue to continue fighting, and to not, really upset her Zanpakutō at the same time, which should be the most important relationship in her life. The problem is, Yoruichi's line, "It's just that I'm much stronger at fighting in combat," is impossibly vague. Like, what does that really mean? She's stronger without her Zanpakutō. She's stronger than her Zanpakutō. For example, I can understand why it might make some sense if, say, her Shikai gives her armoured gloves to punch with, but it turns out that her bare-fisted punch is that much stronger. But even then, wouldn't you just train with your Zanpakutō to make it stronger still? Anyway, before we continue, if you want to help support the channel, subscribing is one of the best ways to do so. Consider hitting that button down below if you like the content. It really would make a massive difference, and I do appreciate it greatly, so thank you all so very much. If we take a look at Yoruichi's fights throughout the series, she really has 3 major battles to her name: Soifon, Aizen, and then Askin, plus she helps to beat up Yami as well. She pretty handily wins her battle against Soifon, ultimately nullifying her Shunko with her own, more powerful Shunko, utilising a technique called Hanki Sosai, which I don't think we ever see again. Would a Zanpakutō have been of any use here? Potentially, but at the end of the day, Yoruichi seems to have everything under control. The same is true against Yami, who Yoruichi easily overwhelms with her hand-to-hand skill, at least until he prepares to fire a Sero at her, forcing Urahara to intervene. To be fair, I think Yoruichi probably could have avoided the Sero if push came to shove, but I suppose it was made harder by the fact that she was tending to Orihime at the time. But then we have her next major fight, Aizen, during the fake Karakura Town arc, and this is where things get admittedly kind of dicey. This isn't your average fight, and so that needs to be taken into account. Aizen has begun the process of transcending, and his soul is undergoing restructuring as he battles within the confines of his Hogyoku cocoon. Even before emerging from said cocoon, he's already become a different kind of soul, a different kind of being, one the likes of which Isshin can't sense. So to expect a lot from Yoruichi here is a little bit unfair, and yet she still performs pretty well with just her fists. Yoruichi pulverizes Aizen, cracking his outer shell numerous times, and with a Shunko-infused punch, is able to smash straight through his arm and send him flying down to the ground below, in one of the cleanest hits the team manages to land. Would a Zanpakutō have actually helped her here? To be totally fair to Yoruichi again, I feel like she gets a lot of value from her Hakuda in this fight, and easily keeps up with her contemporaries. Though on the flip side you could argue those two barely even really got going. Isshin doesn't bother using his Shikai or Bankai for whatever reason, and Kisuke doesn't use Bankai, so the two of them had a lot more wiggle room to improve, seemingly a much higher ability ceiling left over to them in that fight, while it feels like we saw much of what Yoruichi was capable of. Even if she doesn't want to use her Zanpakutō, why not at least use Raijin Senkei? Then there's the fact that she had to come to the battlefield using Kisuke's specially made anti-hero armor, wherein one targeted hit from Aizen rendered each limb useless. Again, it's impossible to know how her Zanpakutō could have made a difference without knowing what it can do. The point I'm trying to make is that Yoruichi just feels unnecessarily exposed here. She's come to the battlefield already at a disadvantage. But then, of course, there's the most recent fight, the one against Askin, and I can't help but think this is the one where her options feel the most limited as a result of her own choices. Things start off pretty good, with Yoruichi's Raijin Senkei overwhelming the sternritter, but as soon as he reveals his ability, the death dealing, and somehow nebulously hits her with a gift ball, the fight is effectively over. The biggest blow to Yoruichi's combat ability is the simple fact that even with Kisuke's immuno-enhancer, she still finds herself completely at Askin's mercy and is totally out of options. Were Kisuke not around, Yoruichi would have been screwed over in this circumstance and lost the fight ages ago. And again, being totally fair to Yoruichi, a lot of fighters found themselves in exactly the same situation against Askin in particular, because that's just how his ability works. Even Ichigo was completely screwed. Which is why, though, I've always found it a little bit of a cop-out that Kubo doesn't reveal how Yoruichi, of all characters, managed to get hit by the gift ball, as that's essentially what spelled the end of the fight. Again, we don't know what Yoruichi's Zanpakutō does. It seems likely that it wouldn't have given her an out here, but still, an option is surely an option. Unless it really is absolutely horrible, but I just don't see how that can be. Before we end things here, I just want to take a look at one other facet of this whole question, and that's the Shihoin family in general. Because although an in-universe reason has now been issued for why Yoruichi doesn't use her Zanpakutō, it should be noted that in the manga prior to this reason being given, Yoruichi was not alone in this. Her younger brother Yushiro also favoured hand-to-hand combat as well, and even utilised his own variation of Shunko in the battle against Askin. Plus there's Chika Shihoin, who admittedly we know virtually nothing about, despite being pictured with his Zanpakutō in Kubo's official artwork, which looks awesome by the way, in episode 7 of the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime, and the only time we've seen Chika Shihoin doing literally anything. Chika is, I think, the only member of the original Gotei 13 shown fighting the Quincy using Hakuda alone. So Hakuda is clearly a Shihoin family speciality in general, and not something unique to Yoruichi. Now, I expect Chika to actively use his Zanpakutō in battle in comparison, but for now, we'll just have to wait and see on that. Alright everyone, that's it for today's video. Why doesn't Yoruichi use her Zanpakutō in battle? Well, can't for your own world, it does give us an answer. How satisfying an answer it really is, though, that is up for debate. I think there are still a lot of questions surrounding the fact that Yoruichi chooses to use Hakuda alone and not even bring a Zanpakutō to the battlefield. Let me know, of course, your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think Yoruichi's Zanpakutō could possibly be as to be so bad as to not even want to use it as an option, to not even want to bring it with her as a fail-safe, a contingency? All of these things seem like they would help, even if the situation is completely hopeless. A Zanpakutō, you would think, would at least be some kind of an option. And again, it cannot be healthy that Yoruichi has such a bad relationship with her Zanpakutō and has seemingly had it like this for centuries. Since probably before Turn Back the Pendulum, and after and beyond that, right up to the present day, the Zanpakutō has never accepted this as their reality, which is not good in my opinion, and doesn't seem to really make any sense. But again, I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comments below, so do please let me know. Once again, thank you so very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the video. Consider hitting subscribe down below to help push us to 300,000 subs. And of course, check out the Patreon as well, the link to which you can find in the description. A huge thank you to all the new patrons recently. It does mean absolutely everything as we go through the 1000-Year Blood War Arc Core 4 and all the coverage for that. Speaking of which, check out my review of episode 41 as well for a deeper, better look at the episode. Thank you again, everyone. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.